might want to turn your graphics slider up a little bit, Coop. Man, this is the PlayStation 2 version of Gungrave Graveyard. I've got that name wrong. Gungrave G.O.R.E. And in actual fact, I like this cel-shaded look. It's a pretty game for a PlayStation 2 title, and I remember it going past, but I never played it. It's been re-released. It's on Game Pass. It's 30GB, and I'll tell you now, don't fork out any money for this, but it's a perfect Game Pass title. I'm running this on high, and it comes with all the TAA, FSA, ray tracing additions that you'd see with a modern game, but I've kind of turned the majority of them off because I want that high definition, and I want 60 frames per second, GTX 1660. Nice cutscenes, nice production, an incredible Prometheus-like intro showing some very high detailed graphics and effects, and it also is extremely strong on particle and particle physics. It's a very pretty game, but as we all know, beauty isn't in the eye of the beholder. Have I got that the right way around? The bullet-based third-person ARPG is by a long stretch my favourite genre, and a genre that I do not hold back in saying I am incredibly well versed in. A new game in that slot has got to do so much to impress me that I genuinely feel sorry for any IP that wants to compete with this genre's history. There are some stunners in it, and so it's a rod for its own back already being built. Have I got that the right way around? It's got an auto aim on it, which is that square box that you can see. You can get headshots in, but it's got the strangest auto fire mechanism in it that I've ever come across in a video game. Essentially, one click of that trigger button gets 4 shots released from the gun. Okay, and the brain does recognize that, but when you're in the thick of it, you're basically having to pound that trigger. You can't keep your finger on it, and you can't tap it for individual bullets. You've got to do this burst fire, which ends up just turning out to be complete chaos. Another issue is sending back these rockets, which you're supposed to be able to do on circle, but that parry window is smaller than Dark Souls 2. So concentrating on that is just a no-go, but that's a shame. I really like counter moves and the effects they have on your environments. If you time them well, the payoff can be very rewarding. And that brings me on to some of this game's similarities with other titles in the genre. As you can see, we've got a score meter, which carries over from the original game, and Devil May Cry was around back then, so it's not a revolutionary idea, and it's not something that's been completely copied. It isn't a game changer. You're not going to be like, oh my god, I have to find my next hit, a la Mercenaries mode. The boxes do count as hits, so you can carry over that score. They also kept some of the UI from the original game, including that Gurnin skull up in the top left, which doesn't age well. I don't like it. I would have much preferred a mini-map. Some of this game's issues lie in not being able to find who's left to kill to open up the next level. And that puts me on to its progression and how it's all structured as a video game. It really does score well with me on not having any bullshit puzzles, any stupid backtracking or going around and having to find a switch. This is straight down the middle, balls to said wall, gunplay, dodging, close quarters, flashy huge effects, big end of level bosses. Everything is in the right place when it comes to the beautiful tropes that make this genre so good. The character design, or the guy that you play as, gives me really massive house moving castle vibes. I think it's the jacket and the hair. Castlevania, sort of Lords of Shadow also. Now let's talk about the elephant in Tut Room. Platinum should have remade this. You know they should have done, and it would have been a hell of a lot better. They would have implemented a really cool dodge mechanic in it. You do have a dive on X, but it really feels clunky and unnatural, and when things get close to you or you're swamped, there's no real area effect close quarters counter. It does come mid to late game, but at the start, first quarter, you've got to keep your distance with everything. It doesn't feel too natural, especially as you're someone who's carrying a massive steel metal, I think it's a headstone on your back. Now let's talk about how it handles cover, because it takes some getting used to. You cannot crouch behind anything. There is no crouch at all. The level design is pretty linear, but that isn't too bad a thing, because this game is just all about flashy combat, looking badass, and using some incredible moves. Now let's talk about that. There are too many, introduced too quickly, so you're overwhelmed. When a problem comes up, your brain is like, which one do I go for? You've got a double trigger move, you've got this crazy triangle move, you've got moves on the R buttons for the cover and pulling people towards you. At one point you go full Matrix Reloaded, which is really cool, but it just feels a little bit style over substance. It's also not too clear to me when these moves are available or which ones cost what on your specials meter. So stuff gets really out of hand and you're just button whacking all over the pad to try and see which move you've got access to. So you can see that there's a few missile dudes elevated in here, and you're taking the time to use that circle to send the missile back is just not worth it when you've got a huge crowd of people around you, because you've got to just stand still. There's also another move that involves standing still. So if you just keep pumping your fire button, you go into this strange, almost pivotal turret mode, which allows you huge strength on your gunfire power, and you can just clear a room out. But you have to remain stationary. And it kind of clashes with a lot of the game's message with big melee dudes coming up to you and everybody constantly being in your face. You rarely get the chance to enjoy that mechanic. Despite me moaning about it, and despite the fact that there's like 16 games out there that do exactly what this does a hell of a lot better, I was playing it until 5 o'clock in the morning last night. It sort of drags you in. The bosses aren't terrible, and the way that you can spot enemies that are going to give you a bit of shield buff, you pluck them out with the R button or hold them up as cover, is quite funny, because you're just walking forward, you're just a machine of murder. That brings me on to the gore and how luxurious that is. Quite impressed they've kept that in and haven't nerfed any of this for mainstream audiences. It's a full-on, brutal, flashy, great looking game in that respect. Let's talk about its upgrade meta game, and there's nothing in here that's going to surprise you, but you are going to be pleased at the amount of directions you can take certain things in, and your demolition shot and skill tree is pretty big. This game can feel a little bit AA, especially with the UI and menus. That's where I see some major lackluster. No individual bullet's gonna kill you to a certain extent, and what you do is maintain that shield by pulling enemies towards you that you've set up to be used on the regeneration front. It feels like an ARPG, i.e. a top-down Diablo type, where you're taking loads of damage but you're maintaining that damage by boosting your shields and keeping yourself alive through killing, just like you would on a Bloodborne setup, where the more you take down, the bigger the reward is for your health or shields. And it kind of works because you're looking out for where you can top up the shield, enemies that are about to die. It's just you cannot allow yourself to get swamped or cornered, because there is no way out. Enemies and environments, does it change them up quite a bit? Yeah, I'm enjoying that cyberpunk level we just saw in the streets. Then you get taken down to the sewers and it pumps in all manner of disgusting monster leech type slug things. It's pretty cool, and I like the change up in the personnel as well. You don't just get those foot soldiers that you see in the opening front quarter of the game. Stuff really goes crazy level 3 onwards. You know when you buy a supermarket owned brand of something, but you're well familiar with the actual original brand, and it just misses the mark. You can't put your finger on why it's not as good as the more expensive version, and that's what I have here when I look at other games in this genre, particularly with the Platinum series, Bayonetta, and there's one more which you're going to look at in a second. Regulars know where I'm going with this. The original Gungrave, I think, was one of these PlayStation 2 games that got made because they had some new tech and they wanted to show off some sort of flashy visual aspect, or just make a game that looked completely badass, almost like a manga cartoon. Whether it was any good to play or whether those mechanics had any depth to them wasn't something they were worried about. So when you port a model like that to a modern game audience, you need to implement some stuff that's going to keep people engaged against what it's competing with, and it doesn't really deliver on that front for me. Thank God it's on Game Pass, and thank God I didn't pay full price for it on the PlayStation 5 or any other console. This is perfect for $6.99 a month. I did, however, this is probably PC only, get this a lot. I had to repair the files and lose all my save data on original installation, so watch out for that one. Could have put money on it, right? Regulars, Michael, Sean, you know that I worship this game, and every millisecond I'm playing Gungrave, I'm thinking, Vanquish does all of this so much better, and it's got cover, and it was made in 2011, but it's not on the Microsoft Store, just sitting on Steam if you own a PC. And of course it's got a remake collection edition that's also PlayStation 5, annotations and links for my reviews. You need to look at this game. If you have just come across Gungrave and you think, yeah, I'm such a badass, I love all this flash, get over to Vanquish. I have been Couch Coop. I will see you down there.